The Slytherin common room lived under the lake. Harry liked it immediately and was careful not to show how much. Greenish light moved across the low stone ceiling in slow ripples, thrown up from the black water pressing against the windows, and now and then a pale shape drifted past in the dark outside. Something long, something patient, gone before you could name it. The room was all carved stone and green leather, and the small competing fires of a dozen quiet conversations. It was a room built by people who understood that the most dangerous thing in any space is the thing you don't notice watching you. Harry stood near the wall and made an inventory. This was the skill the cupboard had given him, sharpened over 10 years into something close to instinct. Walk into a room and, before anything else, find the power. Who deferred to whom, whose laugh the others checked themselves against, where a boy could stand to be neither the tallest target nor invisibly weak. The Dursleys had taught it to him as survival. Tonight, he felt it turn over in his chest like an engine finding its gear, and he understood that here it would not merely keep him alive. Here, it would make him. "You're not what I expected," said Draco Malfoy. The boy had detached himself from a knot of older students and arranged himself in front of Harry with the studied carelessness of someone who had practiced being looked at. Two larger boys hung at his shoulders like furniture. Harry had clocked all three on the train and dismissed two of them. The third, Malfoy, was useful, not for himself, but for what stood behind him. A name, a house with a seat at every table that mattered. A father who, Harry had already gathered, had been very close to certain people during the war and had paid no price for it at all. So Harry did the thing he was best at. He chose a face and put it on. He let his shoulders come down a fraction. He let something that looked like a smile happen, the warm and slightly grateful kind, the kind that says, "You of everyone here have seen me correctly." It cost him nothing. It was, he had learned, the single most valuable expression a person could counterfeit, because almost everyone wanted to believe they were the one who'd seen you correctly, and would forgive a great deal of a person who let them think so. "I expected the train, honestly," Harry said. "You told me which way the wind blew and I didn't listen. I've been thinking about that all night." A small, rueful tilt of the head. "Let him win the earlier argument. It's worthless to me and priceless to him. You were right about the houses. I just didn't know yet that I'd rather be right than be liked by the right people." It was a sentence built like a key, and he watched it turn. Malfoy's chin lifted. The sneer he'd come over wearing, the one braced for the famous Potter to be a disappointment, softened into something worse for Malfoy and far better for Harry. The warm condescension of a boy who has decided to be your patron. "Well," Malfoy said, magnanimous now, "you learn quickly. That's more than most." He gestured at the two slabs of boy behind him, as though presenting a wing of a house. "Crab, Goyle, you'll want to know who's worth your time and who isn't. I can save you the trouble." "I'd be grateful," Harry said, and meant the opposite, and was not lying about a single word of it. He did not enjoy it, exactly. That was the part he noticed, standing there wearing the grateful face while Malfoy began the long, delighted work of explaining the world to him. That there was no pleasure in it, no rush, none of the heat he'd half expected. There was only the cool click of a thing fitting where it was meant to fit. He noted that, too, with mild interest. He was beginning to suspect there was very little left in him that ran warm, and he found he didn't miss it. A cold engine wastes no fuel. Across the room, the watchful girl from the feast was reading a book she was plainly not reading, her eyes on Harry over the top of it. He met them once and held them just long enough to tell her, "I see you seeing me," then looked away as though she were nothing, which was the more useful message of the two. He did not sleep much that first night. and what kept him awake was not nerves. It was the scar. It had begun in the hall during the feast, a thin, particular ache, not like a headache, more like a sound heard through a wall, a note struck somewhere far off that only his head could hear. It had sharpened when the teachers stood, and sharpest of all for half a heartbeat when his eyes had crossed the staff table and snagged on the nervous man in the purple turban, the one who stammered, the one everyone seemed to find faintly ridiculous. Most boys, Harry thought, lying in the green dark with the lake breathing against the windows, would be frightened of a pain with no cause. Most boys would tell the matron or write home, or lie awake inventing illnesses. Harry lay awake inventing uses. A pain that answered to something in the room, a scar that had, by every account he'd ever been given, been carved into him by the most dangerous wizard who ever lived. A wizard everyone insisted was dead, and whom the adults discussed in the careful, lowered voices people reserve for things that are not, in fact, safely over. Harry had spent his whole life being told what he was, a burden, a freak, a liar, a hero. He had believed none of it, because none of the people saying it had ever been on his side. But a pain that came when a particular man was near, that wasn't a story someone was telling him. That wasn't a story someone was telling him. That was information, and information, unlike love, had never once let him down. He turned the scar's ache over and over in the dark, the way another child might worry a loose tooth, and he was not afraid. And somewhere underneath the not being afraid, there was a small, clean, terrible curiosity, lighting up like a coal. Something of him is still here, Harry thought, and something of him is in me. It should have horrified him. He waited, honestly, to be horrified. He had enough sense to know that was the response a normal person would have, and he had learned to perform normal responses so well that he sometimes checked for them in himself, the way you check a pocket for keys. The horror didn't come. What came instead, as the lake light rippled green across the ceiling and the long pale shapes drifted by outside, was the slow, delighted certainty of a boy who has just discovered that the locked door at the end of the hall has, all this time, been his door, and that no one else even knows it's there. He smiled at the dark. There was no one to see it, so it was briefly a true one. Then he closed his eyes and began, methodically, to plan. By the end of his first week, Harry had learned 3 things worth keeping. The first was that Severus Snape hated him, and that the hatred was old and aimed at a man Harry had never met. It happened in the dungeons, in the cold room where they brewed, and it was meant to be a humiliation. The potions master came down the rows of cauldrons like weather coming down a valley, and stopped over Harry, and asked him a question pitched precisely beyond what a first year could know, asked it with the thin pleasure of a man uncorking a grievance he'd been saving for years. The whole class turned to watch the famous boy fail. Harry had read ahead. Of course he had read ahead. He had read every book in his trunk twice before term, because a boy who has been powerless his whole life does not arrive at the source of power and decline to study it. He could have answered. He let the silence stretch 1 second, 2, long enough to feel the class lean in for the kill. And then he gave the answer, complete and correct, in a small, flat voice with no triumph in it at all. That was the choice that mattered, not the answer, the absence of triumph. He watched Snape's face as it landed, and he understood with the swift clarity that was becoming the most reliable thing about him that Snape had not wanted a correct answer or an incorrect one. Snape had wanted James Potter's arrogance to walk through that door wearing this boy's face, so that he could punish it. Harry had simply declined to bring it, He had given the man a quiet, watchful, courteous stranger instead, and he saw the hatred falter, confused, because it had been built for someone else, and this boy fit none of its corners. "He's not my enemy," Harry thought, scraping his ingredients with great care. "He's a wound someone else made, walking around looking for the person who made it. I only have to keep not being that person. A man like that, handled right, isn't a wall. He's a door that thinks it's a wall." The second thing Harry learned was the geography of dislike, and that it could be formed. The school had decided how to feel about him with a speed he found almost funny. The Gryffindors loathed him on principle. Their hero sorted into the snake pit the story spoiled. The Hufflepuffs were wary. The Ravenclaws watched him like a sum that hadn't come out right. In his own house had not decided at all. Slytherin was holding its applause, waiting to see whether the famous orphan would be an asset or an embarrassment to be quietly drowned. Most boys would have tried to be liked by everyone. Harry understood that being liked by everyone is the ambition of people with no plan. He set out instead to be useful to a few and unreadable to the rest, and to let the dislike of the many curdle into exactly the thing he wanted from it, the assumption that he was harmless. A boy the whole school resents is a boy no one thinks to fear. They were all so busy disapproving of him that not one of them watched what he actually did. Not one of them, that is, except the third thing. Her name, he learned, was Hermione Granger, and she was a Gryffindor and Muggle-born, and she had answered more questions in their shared first week than the rest of the year put together. Her hand going up like something spring-loaded, her whole earnest self leaning into the wanting of it. The other children found her exhausting. Harry found her dangerous, and he was careful to be the only person in the castle who did. It was the library that told him. He had taken to spending his evenings there, in the back, with books a first year had no business reading, and twice now he had looked up to find her watching him. Not the way the others watched him, hungry for the scar or sour about the house, but the way he watched people, reading, adding it up. A girl who noticed that the famous Potter, who was supposed to be either a hero or a disappointment, was in fact neither, and was instead doing something she couldn't yet name, in the dark of the stacks, alone, every single night. The second time he caught her at it, he held her gaze across the lamplit table the way he had in the common room. "I see you seeing me," and waited to learn what she'd do with it. She didn't look away. That was the dangerous part. Malfoy would have postured. A Hufflepuff would have blushed and fled. A Gryffindor of the ordinary kind would have come over and confronted him, loud and righteous and easy to handle. She did none of it. She simply held his look for a long, level moment, filing him exactly as he was filing her, and then went back to her book, having decided, he could see, that he was a problem to be understood before a person to be liked. "She'll work it out," he thought, with a flicker of something almost like respect, and then the cold reflex closed over it before it could become anything. "Not soon. Not this year, but she's the only one in this whole castle pointed in the right direction, and one day that's going to matter." He considered her the way he considered the scar, the way he was learning to consider everything, not as friend or enemy, but as a fact about the board. He could befriend her, turn that formidable attention into an ally the way he was turning Malfoy's vanity into a ladder. He could ruin her early, before she grew into the threat he could already see coming. Or he could do the thing that came most naturally to him, the thing that was, he was beginning to understand, the deepest truth of his particular gift. He could do nothing at all, and simply let her be there, watched and unworried, a danger he chose not to diffuse because diffusing her now would cost more attention than she was yet worth. He told himself it was patience. It was the cleverer play, and it was. He did not yet know, he would not understand it for years, that of all the people in that castle he could have removed and didn't, he would keep choosing again and again to leave this one alive. That the boy who let things happen would, every single time the question came to her, find a reason to let her happen too. For now, she was only a girl with her hand up, and a problem for later. He turned back to his book, and the lake pressed black against the windows, and far above them both, in a tower he had never seen, an old man sat awake with a letter he kept rereading, certain he had written a different word.